Hello, 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 and welcome to my YouTube channel. Usually I'm more prepared than this, but I'm in a different room today. Today I want to talk about making life work, right? If you hear some other people say it, they say things like getting it out of the mud or pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps or whatever term that you use, right? The reason why I'm discussing this today is because throughout my lifetime, I've sat around a lot of people in a lot of places in a lot of environments where the people in the environment actually believed that there was something outside of themselves that was holding them back, right? Whether it was their race and ethnicity, that was the number one I heard back in the day growing up. I don't hear it anymore, but I'm not really around people that think like that anymore. But I'm sure there probably are people still out there like that. Family dynamics are holding them back. Lack of finances are holding them back. Some type of oppressive system that we all know exists is holding them back. But I mean, there's many facets of it, right? Because if you study sociology, you learn in those classes or you teach in those classes, because I've taught them, that nothing is existing in a silo, that there's so many pieces that go into every single puzzle, and it's the same thing with every person. So none of us can just sit around and say, this is the particular reason why I don't have this particular success in my life, right? Most of the time when we don't have success in our lives with certain things, we can clearly look at the self-sabotage that was probably pursued, and we didn't know it because we had a pattern, right? Often that is a lot of self-sabotage. It's like connecting with the wrong type of people, getting involved in the wrong type of things, not using your intuition, not listening to, wisdom that says this is not a long-term outcome, whatever it is. A lot of us go down that road. But what I have learned and what I do know, right? As a person, just a human, right? Because this applies to everyone. As a human who started out in life with one idea about exactly how it was going to go, whether it was going to be being married, it was going to be with the kids, and it was going to be in a household where I was assisting someone pay all of the benefits of our household while I gave all of my time and energy to raising children that were something to be proud of, children that were going to be awesome citizens for the world, children that were going to be amazing. In this process, though, something I really failed to understand was you have to be really, really, really careful about who you choose to do these things with, right? So when we choose the wrong people to go down these paths with, we start to look at life and say, well, life didn't deliver to me. I didn't get what I want. When really we self-sabotage by choosing incorrectly, because there were probably many signs that we were choosing incorrectly, right? So I'm sharing this story because I think it's so important at this time in my life. So I went down this journey and I had this idea that I don't have a scarcity mindset and I don't have a poverty mindset in any kind of way. But I had this idea that I was going to have a good life. I never thought about what was going to go into it, how it was going to work, what it was going to be, what it was going to have, what it was going to create. I just I'm going to have a good life. My children are going to have a good life. I'm going to be upper class, if not wealthy, whatever. I'm going to have a good life. I never even questioned it, right? And in my mind, I was just going to college because it was something to do all throughout my 20s, because I didn't have my children until I was nearly 30 and 28. And so I was just going to school, and I thought that was, I'm so happy I did, because, man, let me tell you, people that say degrees are useless don't know how to work them. So nonetheless, I did this process with a specific outcome in mind, right? So this is how life works. I still have in my mind the same outcome. I still have the desire to give my girls an upper class lifestyle. Still have the desire to give them upper class opportunities. I still have the desire to make sure doors are open for them in places so they can choose. If I don't want to walk through the door at Harvard, I'll choose. If I don't want to walk through the door at Yale, I'll choose. It's not that door is shut and I couldn't get in it even if I wanted to. It's like when guys go I would never date her, or the celebrities. I wouldn't date her. She looks like this and that. I'm like, you turning down an invitation that you were never given. It's just, it's useless. So I want them to have those options to say, I can go here, I can go there, I can do this, I can do that, right? So what we have to remember that when we have a really specific outcome that we want, we have to be really loose in the details of how it gets done, right? Because that flexibility will allow us to have an amazing and abundant life, because we're not focused on that specific way that it didn't happen, right? So I didn't get that white picket fence in that marriage and relationship and all that kind of stuff where someone was a natural provider and I was able to stay at home with the kids, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't handed that in a marriage. But what I did do was create it for myself. Once I realized that after being divorced, no one was going to come around and save me or give me anything or come and pick me up off the ground. It was even shared with me in the courtroom. The judge, he had a real negative, ugly attitude towards women in general. And I was like, how did this even happen? How did I get in his courtroom? But it showed me, because I wasn't coddled, I wasn't given anything, I wasn't treated like nothing. I walked away with absolutely a house that was $16,000 in arrears. And I was like, well, I gotta raise my children somewhere. And so I just did that thing, right? And so what I mean was that was the prime time in my life where I realized that you can have all the stuff that you want in life, but if you think it's gonna come through the vessel of other people, then that means that you're gonna have to be manipulative, you're gonna have to be usury, because you're too focused on the outcome. So in order for me to take that off the table, because I want this outcome and I want this thing to happen and I want this life, I had to really start to dig deep within myself. I had to really start to think about, what is it in me that attracted this type of connection or relationship that I had, and that thought it was okay to continue doing this thing for like 7 years? Oof, 7 years. It wasn't until the children came that my mind was like, girl, you can't drive off the cliff. You got children in the back seat. And so that was kind of, but it's 7 years. And so I had to think about that, like, what was it? When I tell you, I took years of healing to try to be accountable, to try to be responsible for all the choices that I made in all of these situations. But what's so funny is that my daughters today have an upper class lifestyle. My daughters today can choose to go to any schools that they want to. For the most part, they choose the one they're in, which is a really good school, right? My daughters are involved in anything they want. They call and say they need this, that, I need these shoes for this, that. I don't even have to think about it. I say yes, yes, yes. Both my daughters have their own credit cards that they don't abuse because they understand finances and they're good with them, right? And they also know how to take care of themselves, like as far as their appearance and their hygiene and all these wonderful things, right? They're nurtured girls. And so I homeschooled them for about 4 years, right? And I also had them with me everywhere I went. I didn't even put them in daycare, but like for one semester in school when it was really tight and I couldn't not put them in the daycare, but I didn't want to do it. So they were in daycare for literally 6 months in their childhood, right? And I told them it was school, 6 months. And so what I'm saying is that people say, how did you do that? No, I was not on welfare. I was not on anybody's welfare. If people know about welfare is not given to anybody with a modicum of potential. They say you own a car, get out. you get $100 a month in child support, get out. You don't, you know what I mean? And so every opportunity that I seized and everything that I created in my time, I say from my 30 to 40-year-old span, was just grit. It was just knowing that nobody was coming to save me. I was like, if I'm going to be a feminine woman, I got to give myself femininity. I was like, because I need to be able to rest in my femininity, whether or not a man is here or not. And that's the mindset that I took. And I would go, my daughters were in ballet, my daughters were in soccer. They were doing these things for years. I would show up at these things, and these women who were there who were married with kids, they would wonder, like, how are you here? First, you're a black woman. That was the one, and you don't have a husband, and you have 2 kids. How are you here? Grit. There's no door that's going to close in my face that I'm going to say okay to if it's a door that I need to open. Grit. I'm not defeated. And when I was going to pick a mate and choose a mate and get married and all this kind of stuff, one of the characteristics that I had a blind spot for was a man that was defeated. And I had been raised by one, which he's a beautiful man. He's great. I love my dad. It's no big deal. But he was very defeated. And I knew this from the moment I met him as a kid. Defeated. And I didn't realize what a defeated mate actually does in a relationship. You can't speak enough life into a defeated person to make them feel better. They've already counted themselves out from the mark. So while I picked the person who was similar to my dad in a lot of ways, there was a lot of ways that he wasn't, right? A lot of ways that my dad was a pretty stand-up guy. He was a provider. He was, and I would honestly say he wasn't the best provider because he could have done more. but he was so defeated that it was what it was, right? And so we had the comfort of the two-parent home, and that was wonderful, because people to be separate in the 80s, especially families with 6 kids and stuff, that wasn't going to work out. We lived in a 5-bedroom house. We lived on a 1/4 acre of land. We had chickens. We had a back house. We had pool tables. We had a basketball court. We didn't have any troubles there. But what I didn't realize was the big blind spot when it came to the defeated mindset of people. And this is even in friendships. I've come across women, and I've been around people where I've met this woman and she was very defeated from the beginning. And I was like, oh, no big deal. People have low self-worth and low self-value all the time, blah, 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 whatever. But what happens is it's like a cancer for the connection. They can't see themselves as on the same level as you. So every comment you make, every move you make, everything you do, every word that comes out of your mouth, it all feels to them like an attack. When you're not even thinking about them, you're seeing them as your equal, but they're not seeing the same way. This is the same thing I've experienced in those relationships that I have had with defeated people, right? When a person is defeated, a man is defeated from my perspective, it's a man from my perspective. But if I was a man sitting here, probably, yeah, I would have the same conversation. It would be a woman, whatever. And so I sit here and I say that because there is never going to be a time in our lives where we are not expected to give ourselves the resources, or we are not expected to give ourselves that life. My daughters know, especially the oldest one. The youngest one knows it. She's kind of bratty, and she's like, I'm a kid, I'm a baby, I get it. I'm a baby of the family too. I get it. It's fun being the baby. He's like, I don't have to do that. I'm not responsible for that. Blah, blah, blah. But the oldest one, she really gets it. And she came to me the other night and she was in tears. And I was like, well, what's wrong with you? And she was like, you do everything. I said, I know. And she's like, you do everything. I said, I've dropped that chip a long time ago. That chip I had on my shoulder about that. I was like, you're fine. And my other daughter came in the room, and this is kind of funny because they're only 2 years, they're not even 2 years apart. And she was like, what is the problem? And she's like, I don't know. What are you talking about? I'm fine. She was like, you look like you were crying. What's happening? And normally she lets it go, but she really wanted to know what we were talking about. And I said, she just said that I do everything, whatever. And so the youngest one, she's still young enough to be a bit in denial about the participation of her other parent. But I don't say anything. It's not my business. They observe because they're smart young ladies. And so I'm sitting there and she's like, what is she crying about? I was like, oh, she's just saying that, I do everything. And she's just saying how she doesn't think it's fair. And I'm like, well, life is not about fair. Life is about getting it. Get it out of the mud, go get a life for yourself, and go be successful, because nobody's gonna look out for you. It just doesn't work like that. And if you happen to come upon somebody that's looking out for you, count it as joy, count it as a blessing, because a lot of people just aren't, right? And so she looked at her sister, the younger one looked at the older one and said, oh my gosh, be a kid. That's not your business. And I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely right. It is not her business. But there's nothing wrong with her having empathy for the process that it takes for a woman to actually, or a person to actually carry the kids around and make the life, right? Because let me tell you, when I think about the days, the moments, the hours, there was not a class I taught when these children were under 10 years old that they weren't sitting in the back of. There was not a place I went. I used to tell people, can my daughters come? And they said, no, I'm all right. I was supposed to go out one night and a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, we're going out and do this and all that. And I was 38 or whatever. I'm like, going out? I don't really go out no more. I got to eat. I go to wine bars, but I don't really just go out. But they were 2 to 3 years younger than me. So it was kind of still in their systems. And so I would go out, and I remember one night there was some type of party or get together, and she was like, you coming? I was like, oh no, my girl's with me tonight, I'm good. And she was like, I can get you a babysitter. And she was like, my sister can do it. And I was like, okay. I didn't really care, because I just don't care about going places. I had already resigned myself to being a mom. I was good with that. And so she was like, she'll do it. And then she called me right before we left, and she was like, she said she'll do it for $30 each. And I was like, $30 each for what? And she was like, to watch your kids. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't pay people to keep my kids. I don't do that. I was like, I just won't go. I'm good. We can play some games together. We're good. And she was like, are you sure you're going to miss the party? I said, girl, I don't care about no parties. I am raising children. I just think about it to this day, how she just thought I was just going to be like, here's $60 to have the privilege of keeping my daughters. My children are privileges. They're not going to be a burden to anybody. You want to keep them? No. And because I've always treated my children like a privilege, there's been nobody in my space that's never able to be the kind of person that snatch my kids. I'll keep them and talk about you behind your back. If I got a glimpse or a whisper that somebody was saying something negative about me because I needed help for a second, I snatched them. And what you learn to do in those processes, when you start telling yourself that I would not be disrespected, I would not be treated poorly, I'm just not going to take nothing from nobody. I'm just not doing it. I'm not going to do it. And so you do that when it comes to people and keeping your kids and all that kind of stuff. If you get into that place, let me tell you, your children, if you open up a new door for your children to be treated like on a pedestal, like there wasn't a place that we went, an environment that we weren't in, that people didn't realize, oh, this woman don't really play about her daughters, so don't mess with them, don't treat them like that. I don't care what man met them, like no, they never met any men. They don't do that. But I don't care who people met them, friends or whatever like that. People didn't treat them the way they treated other folks. When they would go around my family, they didn't crash on them and pick on them and pick on their skin tones, hair textures, all that kind of stuff that families tend to do, because I don't play games. You're not about to create low self-esteem and low self-worth or any of the things like that in my children. And what I want them to know more than anything, which is the whole purpose of this conversation and whole purpose of why I'm sharing any of this message, right? And while I feel a need to be so transparent, which I don't know why, but I'm just going with it. What I want anybody to get from that is that at this point in my life, because my daughters are 16 and 14 years old, it was very important for me to be honest about who does what, and why, and how, right? And so from their perspective, they can't understand how a grown man can be struggling and not financially support their kids when a woman who they've sit in front of their face, they've watched. My daughters have sat in classrooms with me while I was getting degrees and while I was teaching. They were sitting there and the people were like, they're so good. I'm talking about dissertation courses and master's programs. Them little girls were sitting next to me in the class. That's why whenever I taught, it makes me a little bit teared up. Whenever I taught and a woman came in class and she was like, can I bring my child? You better bring that child because they need to see this. They need to see. My camera stopped. But anyway, I felt it was important that they see the sacrifice, because sometimes we don't share these things with our children and other people, and they think that you did it easily. And it's like, nah, sis, nah, dude, I didn't do this easily. Every moment was a process, right? And even in this process of getting 3 degrees while I was already with the children, while I was raising them, it's also writing 7 books in the process, right? And I'm saying all this to say, it ain't a flex or a brag, although it is kind of a flex though, because I worked my ass off, right? And what I have today is a direct reflection of that. Because I just say every moment is possible, every moment we can have more, every moment we can do better. When they see that and they see that somebody is not able to create something or be something or grow and have and all that, they know clearly that it's based on mindset and it's based on choices. That it's not based on ethnicity, it's not based on race, it's not based on where you grew up and where you come from. All those things can be a factor and they can definitely assist you in the process, but they are not truth tellers, right? As I said before, I met women when I was out at these soccer games and at these ballet recitals and all that. I had way more than them. And I was a mother who had 2 kids and didn't have a husband, and they couldn't understand. And so we just have to keep that in mind, that everybody has the ability to make the right decisions to create different outcomes in their life. Everybody doesn't have the same ability to just have the same thing that everybody else has, right? I may never be a person that's like wealthy in a sense of, millions of dollars and stuff like that. I don't push it away, but I mean, it may not happen, but it doesn't matter, because there's a threshold of a good life that we get to. And when you meet people and they have a lack of contentment, or they don't respect the hard work that goes into raising children and working hard and all this kind of stuff, it's like it's useless, because there's no other, I can't even put it into the right words. There's no other clarity that you're ever going to get in that type of situation than actually speaking to the people who have gone through it and done it. And when people try to invalidate your experiences, I remember this one guy I was talking to, he kept saying, I was saying how one of my friends said that when her husband passed away, divorced, I can't even remember who it was, she told her kids that, you know, they were up Schitt's Creek. And she was like, we're in trouble, whatever, right? And I was like, but she did it. She pulled it out. She's professor. She does so much stuff now. And I was just like, she did it, right? She did it. And he was like, you know, well, what assistance did she get? Did she not have a life insurance? Did she not? I'm like, why is it so necessary to discount somebody's hard work? I'm like, it's amazing to me. So this is probably a twofold conversation. I don't really even know what I'm talking about anymore today. But I just felt like this was a message I had to share. So whatever you pick up in it, then you may have needed it. Nonetheless, I was about to end the video anyway. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. And just keep in mind that everybody has the opportunity, the ability, and the options to create something in their lives, right? And while I feel like I'm a cute, attractive woman, I did not sit around anywhere showing cleavage and pushing up to men or anything like that to make anything happen in my life, right? It was pure mind, pure mindset, pure dedication, pure energy, pure discipline, consistency, and that's all, right? There's no other ways to get this stuff done, right? Someone used to ask, what brings a person to want to write a book and do? There's nothing that brings, right? It's discipline. It's sitting down, sitting with something, having a long-term perspective and saying, this is going to take some time, but I'm willing to do it. Get it out the mud. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.